We welcome you to another edition of the Brattlecast, where we talk about books, old, new, out of print, collections of all kinds. And here with Ken Gloss, of course, I'm Jordan Rich. And you know the old expression, a picture is worth 1,000 words? Well, I don't know where we're going with this because you just told me the basic theme of what we're going to talk about. But what is it that we can learn from photographs that aren't necessarily intended? That's where we're going, right?
That's exactly where we're going. And what sort of prompted this one is we got a collection. Well, it's happened a couple of times. I won't say it was just recently. One time it was one of my daughters or daughter's friends. Another time it was just a random young person who was in the store. And we got a collection of photographs in, and we got also a collection of postcards in that were essentially real photographs. And what I found fascinating about the reaction was a lot of these photographs were like of town halls, town centers, or maybe it was a museum, of specific exhibition, or maybe it was a bus or a railroad. And there was very, very obviously in the photograph or in the picture something that whoever the photographer was meant you to see. In other words, it might have been what Downtown Crossing looked like, or what Copley Square looked like for Boston, or maybe Times Square in New York. You know, the sort of the overall of it. And each time when some of the younger kids, you know, maybe anywhere from 10 to about 15 were looking at it, what surprised me was not necessarily seeing what the bus looked like, not necessarily seeing what Times Square looked like, but seeing a store window. And in the store window, you might have seen newspaper, 5 cents, or seeing a newsstand out on the street and seeing a headline, Mickey Mantle hits home run. In other words, it would just happen to be on the newsstand. Maybe being fascinated by, look at the clothes that people were wearing. Look at how they dressed. Another one might have been, look at the old police car parked on the side of the street. Look at the siren on top of the old police car, you know, and you had to explain what that was. Or maybe a newsboy on the corner, you know, with the headlines out there, and just all these little things, or what the street light looked like, the traffic lights,
Sure.
but also just how they looked, how they were designed, how different they are, or looking at a place and saying, look at how low those buildings are. They're, you know, they're old, and the windows are small. Another one that I loved, seeing a picture of an apartment building with a store, and the picture was definitely the sign of the apartment building, but there was an air conditioner in almost every window. And and what it made me realize is that what I thought would be a wonderful history course for students or even adults is to get large numbers of old photographs and look at them, but not look at them from the perspective of what they were intended to show you, but look at them from what you can learn by looking in the background.
Two observations to make at this point from me. One is the Brattle Bookshop is a font of possibilities with all the magazines. You and I have done those Life magazine
Yeah.
stories, and just looking at the ads, forget about the articles. And the other thing is, it reminds me of op art occasionally when you look at something and then you say, well, what do you see here? Well,
Yeah.
I see an elephant, I see a raccoon, whatever it might be. But if you really study photographs, as you say, there's a wealth of things you can find. And I think a lot of times today, where people are taking pictures every 2 seconds on their phones and then not even looking at them, that attention to detail is lost. And when they discover it again, it's really fun.
Yeah. Or if you look at a parade,
Mm.
you can look at maybe a baby carriage there. What a baby carriage looked like in 1930 or 40 or 50. If someone's waving a flag, how did the flag look at that time? So I just think or you see a photographer taking a picture. They didn't always just use their phone to do that.
How about one of your favorite topics, which is baseball? Look at a baseball crowd from 1915. All the men are wearing straw hats and boaters, and the women are all dressed, and the men have ties. That kind of
Or
thing. Yeah,
sport
right.
coats
Sure,
also.
sure.
How many men do you see wearing sport coats at a baseball game nowadays?
Just the umpires.
or, or or even you look at if Fenway Park, I'm more familiar. You look out in Fenway Park and there'll be advertising all over the Green Monster. Uh, you look and it had the old screen, and if you look closely, there was a ladder where they'd climb up before the game and get the balls out. And maybe a younger person who didn't realize that would go, why is there a ladder on the wall? And so what I feel would be a fascinating study in even a history course would be to bring out a bunch of very interesting photographs like that, and having a class even of high school students, and say, what did you learn out of this? What did you get looking back at a picture 50, 75, 100 years old? And then say, go out and take pictures yourself,
Right.
and take pictures such in the same style that the photographer was, but look at your pictures from today, and what will someone 50 years from now look back, and what will they actually see?
Well, Ken, as
And
I mentioned, and I'd love you to expound on this, the Brattle Bookshop is the home to a treasure trove of photograph material, right? I mean,
oh,
you could probably spend days going through and selecting some prime examples.
well, one of the problems is you can spend days doing it and be fascinated, and it is so. If we get in a collection of postcards or a collection of albums of photographs, or even people's scrapbooks of from the 50s and 60s of just the snapshots. I'll tell you, if you've got a big page, just looking through and seeing what the hairstyles look like, what the clothes looks like, maybe some of the little girls with the frilly dresses, or the boys with the shorts, or uh, how the tenement houses, or how the three deckers or deckers in Boston looked, uh, what the bus looked like. And you just start going through it, and you realize in many cases you do look at what was intended to be looked at, but then in many cases, look at that neon sign. Uh, oh, there was a hot dog stand, or a Joe and Nemo's, which used to be in Scully Square and around, and hot dogs were 2 for a quarter. And it brings out a lot of points of history that are really sort of jumping off points, because you could say, well, great, a student sees that hot dogs were only 2 for a quarter, and they go, boy, they were giving them away and all that. But then you have to say, wait a minute. Also, the minimum wage, or the wage that someone was getting paid, might have been $1 an hour.
Yeah, you might have to explain what 2 bits means too to a young
Well,
person.
but it's a wonderful, wonderful way, and I've seen this with people who work at the store, with myself. Of you start looking at that, and then you start saying, okay, how did people at that time? How did they work? How did they get places? What type of clothes do they wear? The prices were this, but what did they get paid?
Mm.
You know, you see a sign for a car for $750. All well and good, except if you make $20 a week, and you can get into very deep social issues, but it's a way of leading into it that you don't necessarily reading a textbook, that it's just sort of this fact, this fact. It's like, wow, I want to know more about this.
Yeah, it's freezing time in history. I mean, the idea that you could actually have a shot taken, let's say, at Fenway Park, that's our favorite shrine, when somebody did something rather momentous in the 1930s, it is frozen in time forever and you can study it. And I think that's what you're saying. There's so much more you
Right.
can do and fall into that photograph and learn from it.
Well, and also too, the picture might be of Ted Williams or Babe Ruth or something, but then you look in the background, and what did the gloves look like? What did the batting
Mm,
helmets look like? But you can do that for any aspect of history. If someone was taking a picture of their lab at a university 50 or 100 years ago, you look at the electronic equipment, you look at, and everything you see wasn't necessarily intended to be the learning point, but it's a wonderful, wonderful jumping off point to then explain the history of the time. And I thought it would be a lot more interesting. And just because when I see it every time we get in these old albums, and I look at them, and then my wife wants to look at them, and then one of our assistants want to look at them, and then some kid comes in off the street with their parents sometimes, and they stop flipping through the pages, and what seems like just an average everyday thing can become a fascinating artifact that could be explained, expounded upon, and then make you think about, well, what are we doing today that's equivalent? Now, one of the problems with photographs today is so many of them, you don't print out albums of photographs, they're on your phone. And I wonder, even from that aspect, 20, 30, 40 years ago, uh, from now, not
right.
ago, are you going to have as many of these quote archives? I mean, I don't know what happens to all my photographs when I'm gone or whatever. No one, I doubt that anyone's going to download every single one of them and then put them in some sort of printed album. Also, nowadays, these old photos, they're there. As long as it's not pitch black in a room, you can see them electronically. A lot of those photos are there nowadays, and if you lose electricity, they're gone.
That's
And
true.
I guess the other thing that really comes out nowadays, and this is getting to be more and more of an issue, is that actually what was in the picture when it started?
Well, that's exactly right. Photoshopping is something that we've had to live with only for 20 years, and AI is taking over. But there's so many examples that are floating into my head, and I'm thrilled you brought this up because I'm thinking about some of my favorite photographs, and many of them are iconic photographs. But then you look beyond. I mean,
Yeah.
Kennedy giving his speech at the inauguration, you see who's up there on the dais. Obviously Johnson and obviously Jackie, but then you see the Speaker of the House, and you realize, the generals and who's there and who's invited, the parents, the families. It's fascinating. So I think it's a great topic.
And another thing that now I'm, because sometimes when I take pictures now, I'll use the editing and I'll edit out a lot of the background. And I even think to myself sometimes, is actually editing out the background good? Or in a way, does it take away from the interest of what's there and where you are and what
Unless
you're
you're
holding?
Joseph Stalin and you eliminate people from your world, both in the photographs and in the real world. He
I
was
want to
famous
see
for
the
doing.
people.
Yeah, exactly. Ken,
So
this is great. It's the power of the imagination, the theater of the mind. That's what we're doing with this podcast. It's radio on demand, but I think you got your point across, and I'm wholeheartedly with you. I hope you decide to start a course. I'll co-teach it with you.
I would absolutely love that. And I bet you if you talk to people and said, "Do you have any old photo albums?" The problem wouldn't be to get some. It would be to where do you put them all, because they would start flooding in.
Absolutely. He's Ken Gloss. I'm Jordan Rich. You've been listening to the Brattlecast. Go to brattlebookshop.com. Let us know if you have a topic that you'd like. Ken, you're always interested in what the folks have to say.
Always interested in ideas, and I love talking to people.